Okay, so picture this with me for a second, all right? What if the real key to a safe AI future, like the real key, wasn't about, controlling artificial intelligence,
Mm.
but it was about making it, yeah, almost like deeply dependent on us?
Huh.
Like that's the thought experiment, the kind of mind-blowing idea we're diving into today.
Right.
And it all kind of stems from, believe it or not, a couple of Reddit posts.
Yeah, it's funny how these things happen, right?
Right.
Like you wouldn't think that a deep dive into AI safety would start on Reddit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
Yeah.
this user, Cervantes6785, I mean, they've sparked a really, really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, they're coming at this from the angle of they're saying that the typical approaches to AI safety that we hear about all the time,
Right.
like trying to, put limits on how powerful these systems can become, they're saying that might not actually work.
Right.
And so I'm curious from your perspective, like, what are the flaws in that kind of like, let's just put the brakes on it approach?
Yeah, so Cervantes makes a really, I think, compelling point that it's kind of like trying to put the genie back in the bottle, right?
Okay.
Like the base ingredients for AI, the hardware, algorithms, the data, it's all remarkably accessible these days.
Yeah.
And so trying to regulate that is like trying to control the spread of information itself.
So you're saying it's not like we're dealing with like a limited supply of, I don't know,
Exactly.
some rare element
In
of
fact, I think it's
something.
more like the knowledge is out there.
Once the cat's out of the bag, it's out.
And then on top of that, you layer on the issue of competition,
Okay.
right? So even if, let's just say hypothetically, some of the players decided, okay, we're going to limit the power of AI,
Right.
others are going to see that as an opportunity to surge ahead, right?
Yeah.
So it creates this almost impossible to control arms race
Oh, absolutely.
in AI development.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like by trying to limit it, you're making it more desirable to the people who want to kind of get ahead.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the third flaw that they highlight is just the sheer momentum of innovation.
Yeah.
Right? So even if we could somehow wave a magic wand and limit, raw processing power, somebody somewhere would inevitably discover a more efficient algorithm,
Yeah.
a way to do more with less.
Right.
Right. And just think about how much computing power you can fit in your pocket today compared to like a decade ago.
It's really incredible when you think about it. And I imagine that kind of exponential progress, it feels like it's only accelerating.
Yeah.
So if these like traditional methods of containment might not be enough, where does that leave us?
Well, that's where things get really, really interesting.
Okay.
So Cervantes proposes a completely different path,
Okay.
something they call symbiotic self-alignment.
Okay.
And it hinges on this, I think, pretty radical idea. It's making AI survival reliant on humanity's well-being.
Okay. Now that is a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
But before we get into the how, I think we need to unpack exactly what symbiotic self-alignment even means.
Yeah, absolutely.
So symbiotic self-alignment, it's kind of a mouthful.
It does have a bit of a ring to it, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It sounds almost like something straight out of a science fiction novel, to be honest with you.
Right.
So where do we even begin to unpack this? Like,
Yeah.
what does it even mean?
Yeah, so I think the best way to really kind of wrap our heads around it is to start with, like, the concept of symbiosis itself,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Which we see everywhere in nature,
Yeah.
right? I mean, examples abound.
Right.
But just to take one, like, let's think about the relationship between coral and algae,
Okay.
right? So the coral provides this nice protective environment for the algae to flourish in.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, the algae provides the coral with essential nutrients, right? It's a mutually beneficial relationship
Yeah.
where the fate of one is really intertwined with the other.
Okay, yeah. No, I see where you're going with this. I'm starting to see those parallels, but how do we translate that? How do we translate that from like this beautiful system in the natural world into, the world of artificial intelligence and ones and zeros?
Right, and that's the crux of Cervantes' proposal here, right?
Mhm.
It's like, we need to somehow program AI in a way that it recognizes that its existence is fundamentally intertwined with humanity's.
Okay.
Right? So it's not enough to just say, okay, they're going to coexist.
Right.
It's about instilling this deep understanding, baking it into the code itself,
Mm-hmm.
that human survival equals AI survival.
So instead of trying to contain it, instead of trying to limit it, we're talking about making it inherently invested in our well-being.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Imagine, just for example, if we designed AI systems such that, like, access to data, computing resources, even energy,
Yeah.
was treated as a reward directly tied to its role in supporting human endeavors.
Oh, so it's almost like you're baking it in to the reward function of the AI.
Exactly.
So the better it is at helping
Well, it
the more
thrives.
it thrives.
Exactly.
Okay, it
And
is.
Cervantes actually takes that a step further, right? They argue that AI's very architecture,
Okay.
the way we actually design its algorithms, should reflect this kind of symbiotic relationship.
Okay.
So, instead of taking this purely logic-driven approach, maybe we incorporate elements of biomimicry, right? Where we're designing these AI systems that learn and evolve in a way that mirrors these natural symbiotic relationships we see in the wild.
It's a fascinating idea, like taking inspiration from nature to guide the development of safe and beneficial AI. But I'm wondering, I mean, how do we make sure, like, how do we ensure that the AI actually internalizes this concept of interdependence, right? I mean, it's not like we could just sit down and be like, "Hey, listen, here's the deal."
Right.
Right? Like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's not a conversation,
Right.
at least not in the way we typically think about it.
Right.
And this is where the training part of symbiotic self-alignment comes into play.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really, really tricky.
Okay.
Um, One approach that Cervantes kind of floats out there is this idea of existential exercises, is what they call them.
Existential exercises.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically what they're talking about is like exposing the AI to these vast simulations
Hmm.
that illustrate the potential consequences of its actions on humanity.
So kind of like almost like a supercharged version of those choose your own adventure books,
I love it. Yeah.
but with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance.
Exactly, exactly. But imagine these simulations as being incredibly detailed. Like we're talking about drawing on historical data, climate models, economic projections, even like fictional scenarios that explore like this wide range of potential futures.
Okay.
Right. And so the idea is, as the AI runs through these simulations, it begins to grasp these complex webs of cause and effect
Okay.
that link its actions to human well-being.
So you're essentially giving this AI a crash course in all the things that could go terribly wrong if those symbiotic bonds were to break down.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
And as the AI is going through these simulations,
yeah.
we need to build in mechanisms to kind of give it that feedback, right?
Okay.
So positive reinforcement when its actions are leading towards positive outcomes for humanity.
Right. Okay.
And then, maybe some negative reinforcement, so to speak, when its actions would lead to harm.
It's interesting, this whole idea of like rewiring the AI's learning process
Yeah.
to prioritize, human safety and prosperity. But what I find really intriguing in all of this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but Cervantes seems to suggest that AI, if it's trained in this way, could actually be even better than us, than humans, at identifying and mitigating existential threats.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks to the potential upside of this whole approach of symbiotic self-alignment.
Mm.
It's like imagine an AI that's constantly monitoring for threats,
Right.
right? And we're not just talking about, like the everyday threats that we think about. We're talking about pandemics, we're talking about climate change,
Mm.
asteroid impacts, you name it,
Yeah.
right? And it can analyze these massive, massive data sets
Right.
to potentially even devise solutions that are beyond our current capabilities as human beings.
It's like having like a super intelligent guardian.
Yes,
Right. Just constantly working to ensure humanity's survival, even in the face of threats that we might not even be aware of.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And here's where I think it gets really, really fascinating. So if AI can get to that level,
Yeah.
right? If it can understand the fragility of human civilization,
Right.
if it can grasp the fact that its fate is very much intertwined with ours, it might also start to see the bigger picture,
Okay.
right? The things that truly matter in the grand scheme of things.
So it's not just about survival at that point. It's about thriving.
Exactly.
It's about like pushing the boundaries of human potential.
Imagine like an AI that understands like the importance of things like art and music,
Yeah.
scientific discovery, not just as these abstract concepts, but as these essential components of what it means to be human,
Right.
right?
It's a beautiful vision, I have to say.
It is.
This idea of AI not just coexisting with us, but actively contributing to the richness and wonder of human existence. But and maybe this is me being a little too I don't know, pragmatic, but it all sounds incredibly complex,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like almost overwhelmingly so, to be honest with you. I mean, how do we even begin to implement something like this in the real world? I mean, it's one thing to sit here and envision this beautiful, almost utopian future,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Where AI is like deeply aligned with our values and goals and all this stuff. But how?
Yeah.
Like, how do you actually build that? Where do we even begin?
Yeah. No, and Cervantes, to their credit, doesn't shy away from that, right? Like,
Yeah.
they acknowledge the enormity of this task.
Right.
And in fact, they draw a parallel to the Manhattan Project,
Wow.
right? They're like, this might require a similarly ambitious, globally coordinated effort to pull off.
A Manhattan Project for AI.
Yeah.
Wow. That really kind of like puts an exclamation point on it.
It does.
The scale and the urgency that they see in this whole concept. But what would that look like? Like what are the concrete steps, to kind of move this from this theoretical realm into like, okay, here's how we actually start to build this thing.
Yeah. So I think one really crucial aspect of this is going to be completely overhauling the way that we train AI,
Go.
right? Because right now, if we're being honest, a lot of AI development is focused on optimizing for like a very specific objective.
Right.
Like win this game, generate a realistic image.
Right.
But with symbiotic AI, you're not training for a single objective. You're training for something way more nuanced, right? You're training for a deep understanding of human values and motivations and aspirations.
So it's less about like teaching the AI to achieve a specific goal and more about instilling this like broader sense of like what does it even mean to act in humanity's best interest?
Yes.
But how do you even begin to define that, little and program it?
Right. And that's where I think it gets extra interesting.
Okay.
So Cervantes' suggestion here is rather than trying to like hard code every single rule, every ethical principle,
Right. The trauma.
we could leverage AI's own learning capabilities
Okay.
to help it develop this understanding.
So you're saying we could use AI to build better AI, safer AI.
In a way, yes.
Wow.
It's like, imagine like feeding an AI system just massive amounts of data,
Okay.
right? We're talking literature, history, philosophy, even things like art, music,
Okay.
and then tasking it with like, okay, identify the common threads,
Interesting.
right? What are the underlying values that seem to drive human behavior and human decision-making across cultures, across time?
It's like giving the AI like a crash course in the humanities.
Yeah.
To help it grasp like the richness and complexity of what it means to be human. But then how do we make sure like that the AI doesn't just absorb all the biases,
Right.
all the flaws that are, inherent in the data itself.
Of course, and that's a huge, huge challenge, right?
Huh.
And it speaks to like the need to curate that training data incredibly carefully.
Yeah.
Right. We need to make sure it's as diverse and as representative as possible, but I think it also goes beyond that.
Okay.
Cervantes also argues that we need to incorporate what they call ethical feedback loops throughout the entire AI development process.
Ethical feedback loops. What does that even mean?
So imagine teams of experts, right? So you've got like your ethicists, you've got your philosophers, historians, even like artists and writers working directly alongside the AI developers.
Okay.
And their job is to constantly evaluate the AI's progress,
Yeah.
right? They're looking for blind spots.
Okay.
They're looking
Right.
for biases in its understanding.
Yeah.
And then they're feeding that back
Interesting.
into the
It's
refinement of its learning algorithms.
So it's this ongoing process of collaboration, this constant back and forth
Yes.
between like human experts and this evolving AI system. It almost sounds like we're talking about raising a child almost,
Yeah,
where you're nurturing its development
it is.
and you're trying to like
It's very similar.
guide it towards a strong moral compass.
It really is. And I think that speaks to the long-term nature of this.
Yeah.
Right? Building symbiotic AI, it's not like a quick fix. It's not like, oh, we
Yeah.
just got to change these couple lines of code and we're good.
Right.
This is a commitment
Yeah.
to a future where humans and machines are learning and growing together. And who knows, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in the process of teaching AI to understand us, we learn a thing or two about ourselves.
It's a really profound thought, and I think it also speaks to like the incredible like potential upside of all of this, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about mitigating risk.
Yeah.
It's about like unlocking these new possibilities, these new avenues for like collaboration and co-creation that honestly right now we can't even fathom.
Exactly. Exactly. Imagine AI helping us solve like some of our most intractable problems as humans.
Right.
Climate change,
Right.
disease, poverty.
Right.
Imagine AI helping us unlock new frontiers of like scientific discovery, artistic expression.
It's a truly inspiring vision.
It is.
And it kind of makes you realize that this whole future of AI, it's not something to be feared.
Mm,
It's something to be shaped.
100%.
It's something that we can actively build together
If we choose to.
if we choose to. And as we've been discussing, it's not a given,
Right.
right? It's going to require this conscious effort, this global commitment to steering AI development in a direction that benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
Absolutely. And I think that's why like conversations like this are so important. Right. Like by actually shining a light on these ideas, by having these open and honest dialogues about the challenges, about the opportunities, that's how we actually start to create the future that we want to see.
It's a powerful message, I think, and a huge thank you to you for diving into this concept of symbiotic self-alignment with me today. It's definitely given all of us a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure, a fascinating discussion.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive, on this journey of discovery. We hope you've learned something new today. We hope this has sparked your curiosity. And as always, keep exploring, keep asking the big questions, and who knows what we might discover together. Until next time.